Okay, Lightroom tutorial today. So, we want to edit this single exposure Twilight and make it look absolutely amazing. So let's go ahead and identify the problem areas first. So, what jumps out at me as being kind of a problem is the shadows are too dark, but they're not so dark to where they're like pitch black. They just need to be brought up just a little bit. The oranges in these lights are a little bit too much, plus the highlights are a little bit much. The sky area is really dull, and we've got some censored stuff here that we need to get rid of. So let's go ahead and actually run through this. So I always like to start by going down to the lens corrections tab, and I remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. From there, I like to go to the transform section, and I either go auto or level. So let's go, auto or vertical. So I don't think that did much. So we might want to use guided. So guided is pretty much the manual way of doing it. So what we can do is select an area over here, click, and drag our guide. So we can make that right there. And put our second one right here. And I'm just lining it up with these right here. And I think this is a little bit off. It's because of this one right here. So let's go ahead and move that there and there. Yeah, this one was just a little bit off. And we'll put that. Yeah, that looks good. So now what we can do is get to the actual like editing part. So let's go back up to our basic tab, and I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the white balance. So I think 6,000 looks good. It's a little bit magenta-y, so we're gonna bring that down. So before is a little bit too much magenta, after we're getting into that more neutral tone. So let's go ahead and bring down the highlights. I'm gonna go with -60. I'm gonna bring up the shadows quite a bit. About 75 will do. I'm gonna bring up the exposure on this. About +20. 0.20, I should say. Clarity. I'm gonna bring in about 15 clarity. Saturation. I think the saturation levels are pretty good on this. Nothing too crazy that I want to do. Tone curve, we don't need to mess with that. HSL. This is where things get interesting. So we're gonna go ahead and see all this orange. We want to take some of that out. We don't want to take it all out, but we just want to take a little bit out. Just a little bit. A -20. Let's see what the yellows are affecting. Yeah, the yellows are looking crazy. It's about -10 in the yellows. Blues, I think the blues could be a little bit bluer. Not like so crazy so where they're causing, artifacts. But I think they could be a little bit bluer. It's about maybe like 30. And I think we're gonna mess with the aqua luminance just to make that pool a little bit darker. It's about -30 in the aquas. Yeah, -30 in the aquas. Sharpening. Let's do that last. I want to show you something with gradients. So this is looking a bit dull to me. Like the sky area especially, it just looks really blah. So we're going to go over to our gradient right here, gradient filter. And we're going to make a gradient starting from the top and hold down shift to make a straight gradient. And about right there to the tops of the trees will be fine. And I like to bring in some blue. About -30 in the blue. Bring out some yellow, and that's not yellow. Bring in some magentas. It's a little bit much. Let's go negative. Not negative. Let's go positive 15. Maybe a little bit more blue. Yeah, negative 40. This looks good. And then we're gonna bring down the exposure just a little bit. And then I'm gonna bring in some, what am I gonna bring in? Some clarity would look good. Yeah, just to make those clouds a little bit more pronounced. So a little bit of clarity, about 60 in the clarity. Saturation, kind of want to put some saturation in there. Just a little bit of saturation, so about 20. Contrast, yeah, let's put some contrast in there. 20 in the contrast, and I want to make this more selective. So we're going to go to the range mask, turn that to luminance, and hold down Option, and either one of these will be fine, but we're going to use the left side because we don't want it to affect the dark areas like the trees. So about like there's looking good. So before, after, looks much more interesting. So close that, and I'm actually going to put another gradient right here just so this foreground's not too much. Let's go ahead and hold down Shift and bring up that gradient, and we're going to bring down the exposure just so our eye is going towards the center. So that looks pretty good so far. Let's go to our sharpening. Actually, hold on one second. I'm going to put a vignette on this. Yeah, just a slight vignette. Negative 20. Yeah, that looks good. Now we can do sharpening. Sharpening's fun. So let's go ahead and do 60 sharpening and mask it only to the areas like the edges. So I'm holding down Alt and moving the masking slider. So I think 60 is a little bit too much. Maybe 75 looks good. And then I have a little bit of noise here in the, what are these things called? Clouds. So we're gonna go ahead and take care of that. Hold down, or not hold down anything. Actually, you could make it black and white so you're not distracted by the color. Hold down Alt, and I'm gonna bring up the luminance just so we're getting rid of that noise. I don't want to go too far. Maybe 60 is looking good. That looks pretty nice. And then I want to bring up the detail, and I'm gonna bring this up to about 90. Just so it's not too smooth. We're still getting a little bit of detail in there. Let me actually zoom in here real quick. And I don't know if you can notice this, but it's kind of visible here. We have some color noise. So if I bring that down a lot, you can see that the color noise is very prevalent there. So what we can do is just bring that up to about 75. So it just gets rid of that color noise. And I think that looks pretty good so far. So that looks good. That looks good. I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit more. And then I'm going to bring down the highlights. About negative 80. I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little bit more. And that's what I would call a finished photo. So before, after. Pretty cool. So that's pretty much how I go about editing a single exposure Twilight. So if you guys want anything else like single exposure daytime stuff, just let me know and I will get on that. So anyway, take care guys.